Hey, Salem. So my name is Nick, and I'm here with Brody Burke, and he wants to share with you his story.
I think I differ from like the traditional evangelical narrative where, there's a one-time experience of this is when I came to Christ. I don't have any recollection of that. I've
Okay.
been in the covenant church since I was a baby.
Okay.
I grew up in it. I can remember specific instances though where I've definitely grown closer to Christ,
Hmm.
and I've definitely had revival within my own heart. I
Sure.
can think like when I was 8, and maybe this was like the specific moment when I
Sure.
came to Christ, is after my dad he got fired during the 2008 recession,
Oh, okay.
and he lost his job. He was really worried. Really turned his life around. He started reading the Bible. He stopped. He wasn't an alcoholic, maybe borderline alcohol.
Okay.
Probably not.
Yeah.
He drank a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and he wasn't like abusive or anything with
Okay.
it, but it was. I remember a time when I was a kid and I seen him like throwing up at like the 4th of July, and like
Hmm.
you don't want to see your dad
Yeah.
doing that,
Yeah.
But he really changed his life around. He had a problem with anger when he was younger. Again, he never hit us or anything like that, or hit my mom. But he had a problem with anger, and that was one of the reasons he got fired, because he yelled at his boss. And
Okay.
but yeah, being fired, you have 2 young kids during a recession.
Yeah.
He starts reading the Bible. We start going to church more. We went to church most of the time.
Did you grow up around here?
I grew up in Poplar, Wisconsin, and we would go to Cloverland, Wisconsin, which it was probably a 30-minute drive, maybe shorter. It felt like forever when I was a kid.
For sure.
But that was the church that my great grandfather, when it had burnt down, he was one of the people that helped rebuild it. So on my mother's side, the Pearson side, was very involved in the formation of that church.
Okay.
And that's the church that we went to. My grandparents went to it. My great grandma went to it. There was a time where my cousins and uncle and stuff, they went to it too. But it was, the family church, and that's where we went. And, we went there most times, but it was really at that point where my dad started taking his faith seriously.
Okay.
And I think the whole family started taking their faith a lot more seriously. I remember when I was in middle school, starting a group, I think it was called Team Faithful.
Okay.
And it was just like a couple of us, handful of us Christians, and we would just get together and talk about the Bible at recess. And it was nothing formal or anything, but it was just, just kind of a group. And I started getting really involved. I think when I was 13, my dad led me through confirmation at the church, and that was really cool. He didn't have any formal training. He was just really passionate about, he still is to this day, being really passionate about the Bible and biblical teaching. And that was really cool to spend time with my dad like that. And there's only been a few instances when I've seen him cry. And on my confirmation day, that was one of those instances. And it was also when he lost his job, I seen him cry. It was a big deal because, middle of recession.
Yeah.
I think that definitely was, maybe that was the start. Maybe that's when I gave my life to Christ. I don't quite remember a specific moment of praying. I remember when I was older, and I was kind of concerned about it. And I was like 16, and we were at my grandparents' cabin, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's like, am I saved? Because I can't, everyone talks about their testimony, and it's like, I don't remember a specific circumstance. So I'm like, I get down on my knees and I prayed. I'm like, God, if I have not accepted you in my heart, I'm doing it right now.
Yes.
So I guess that moment, but I think I was saved before that.
Sure.
Eventually I got into high school. I was pretty committed. I went and worked at Covenant Park Bible Camp for 2 summers. And that was just a really great experience. It really deepened my faith. And I remember the summer after, I think my first summer after working there, I got baptized because I hadn't been baptized yet. I think I was baptized as like a child.
Okay.
Maybe
What year was that?
I was born in 2000, and then
Okay.
my baptism was in 2018, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. There was kind of a falling off of faith. I feel like, the prodigal son of nothing publicly, like I didn't renounce my faith. And I think everyone looking in probably seen me and would have thought no different because I still continue to go to church.
Okay.
I still, said all the things I didn't, like curse you, God. I didn't, do anything like that. But I did have a really deep struggle with lust and sexual sin. And there was a real like turning away from God, not in a public sense, but in a real private sense and in the, inner workings of my heart. And it was really Teresa, my wife, who really pushed me in such great ways because we started dating around the time when I was really struggling with all of this. And she was really instrumental in kind of that revival and turning back and turning away from sin and back to God.
Yeah.
And there's been highs and lows ever since. But my faith is something I take very, very seriously today. Cool. If someone like during that time, like if someone said, hey, renounce the gospel or I'm going to kill you, right? And like 2019, I would have probably cracked. Today, I would have been like, pull the trigger. Yeah. It's like, there's just nothing better. And I think that's kind of where we're at. And, I still have the same struggles that I used to. They're not as prominent as they have been because I've taken precautions. Like my phone, I'm not allowed to even go on any adult sites using my phone. And I'm completely locked out of that. Like I can't. Right. I made a password, threw away the password, and then forgot it. And like that was a necessary step. Also, I remember I used to talk to Joe Floristano once a week. I'd call him up and he'd be like, hey, how are you doing with this? And like he'd give me really good wisdom advice. And like that's very helpful. And I think that's what we need in order to, overcome these things is to rely on our brothers and our sisters. And there's definitely been struggles and times where I'm not reading the Bible as much or praying as much, but I think on the whole, at least like right now, it's like I feel like I'm it's really on fire. Yeah. Like that's cool. I just really want to. I think that the main thing that I've seen within this stage of life is that there's a far more greater compassion than there have been within the early stages of my faith. Whereas, like we talk about like issues with the LGBT community. Obviously the Bible says like that's a sin, and it's very clearly a sin every time it's brought up. It's a sin. Right. When in my early days of faith, I was very legalistic and judgmental and perhaps even hateful. Whereas now there's a lot more tender compassion. Yeah. I think for trying to reach the other side and being like, no, I want to talk to you about this because I love you, not because I want you to
be wrong.
Be like me because I want you to be on the winning side because I want to be right. It's like no, it's like I was a sinner. Yeah. It's like I was in the exact same boat that you are. Yeah. And Christ died for me. Yeah. I think of back in 2019, it's like of how easily that could have just derailed my life if it had not been for God working in a whole bunch of people to really speak to my heart, especially my wife, of just really being instrumental in that change. Because I was going down the wrong path. I was. Yeah. And if I kept going down there, I'd probably be dead today. I don't know.
Is there any other? So that's kind of like your life story. Or is there any other like smaller story?
Oh yes, I was gonna bring up. This was another instance of where I was, really struggling with faith and where God came through in a big way. So there was a rapper Hobson who he had a song. I think it was The Ill Mind of Hobson number 8 or something like that. But he at that time of writing the song, he was a Christian. First he was not a Christian, just a regular mainstream rapper. Became a Christian, then fell away from Christianity. And the song was him talking about him falling away from Christianity. And the main point of the song was him having prayers and feeling like they're not answered. Feeling like he's giving prayers and it's just going into silence. And I really resonated with that, and I wrestled with that quite a bit. And I remember we were on a trip in high school with the wrestling team. We were going, somewhere far away, and it was going to be a whole day thing. And I remember talking to the youth pastor, Pastor Nathan Nelson. He was one of the coaches with wrestling too. And I remember talking to him about this, and he gave some really good advice. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember thinking it's like, this is pretty good, but still wrestling with it. And I remember when I actually had to go and physically wrestle someone, I just got completely destroyed because my mind was not in the thinking of, what moves am I going to do? What am I going to do in the next 6 seconds to score? That was something that the coaches often said. It wasn't on that. I was thinking about my faith. I was thinking about eternal things, and I was really struggling. I had a lot of doubts. And I got mopped completely and was crying at the end of the match. And it was just it was bad. But I remember driving back home feeling like I didn't have any answers. Nathan said some good stuff, but I still was wrestling with it. I still was struggling with it. And I get home and I'm just exhausted from the end of the day. I go to bed. And my sister, she has strep throat at this time. And she gets up in the middle of the night because it's just so painful. And she wants to just go into the hospital. I don't know if she would have necessarily gone into the hospital if my parents would just give her an aspirin or something. But she gets up and she walks downstairs and she noticed that there's just this smog over down all of our downstairs. And she wakes up my parents, and we open the door, and this is in the winter. We run outside to the garage, we get in the truck, and we sit in the nice warm truck as my dad's calling these people, because he went downstairs and he seen that it was coming from the furnace. And what had ended up happening was there was a little divider that fell over inside the furnace. And it caused all of the carbon monoxide and the soot to come out with it. But if it had fell a different way, the soot wouldn't have came with it. It's just been spewing out carbon monoxide. So it was good that it fell that certain way. And one of the guys that was working on cleaning this out and detecting how much CO2 was actually in the air, he said that if it was like an hour later, that if she had taken more than an hour later, we would have never woken up.
Wow.
And we would have all been dead. And I thought about that in that moment, and I said, there's kind of my answer of it could have been, we were so close as a family from being just completely wiped out.
Wow.
What if my sister hadn't had strep throat? And you can look at that situation like, oh, why would my loving, wonderful sister, why is she getting strep throat? It's like, well, if she didn't have strep throat, we'd all be dead. If that didn't fall the right way, she wouldn't have seen that there's any soot in the air, and we'd all be dead. And that to me kind of reaffirmed a lot of the faith. It seems kind of silly maybe from a secular perspective, but for me in that moment, it's like this was my answer to those questions. It's like I seen God move and really save our family that night. Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting, going back to your first story. We share a lot in common. We're very different people, but I struggled with lust and pornography so much growing up. And I was born in 1990, so we're 10 years apart.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit weird because I grew up as the internet was growing up, and so I've had to do the same things where it's my wife has the code, and she knows how to open up and my phone. I don't have any internet browsing capabilities on my phone. I don't let myself do that.
It's dangerous.
Even the app store. I'm like, if I need an app, I'll get the code. We'll open it up. I'll get the app, and then we'll close it back down. So there's a lot of, like you said, safeguards that it's just I just don't. It's super inconvenient. It's so inconvenient sometimes. It's just I can't download that app for you right now. I'm sorry. But in the end, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, no, and it's like, it was so difficult too, because I was, I think, 12 or 13 years old when I started watching, and I had no idea of any of this.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I didn't, we never had the talk.
Right.
We never talked about anything. It was kind of, you do that when you're married, and otherwise it's really, really bad.
Yep.
Except when you're married, then it's not bad anymore.
Yeah.
But don't do it. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
So there was no safeguards or anything. There wasn't any, and I don't really blame my parents. I don't think they really knew what was going on. But I remember I was playing a game. It was when the Hobbit movies were coming out. It was when the first one was going to come out, and I really liked. I don't think that I don't. Yeah, well, no, I hadn't seen Lord of the Rings yet, but I really liked The Hobbit because we read it in school, and I was excited for this movie, so I got the app, and it was kind of like Clash of Clans, but Hobbit themed.
Yeah.
It was a fun game. I'm sure it was probably a terrible game, but I was young and I was like, this is the best. But they had a chat in there that basically everyone that was inside this world, like they have different worlds and different servers. Yeah. Everyone inside the server could speak in this open chat. And then you could chat with your teammates and the people you were in the certain clan with, right?
Yeah.
But I remember I befriended this one person who said that they were the same age as me, a girl from Canada. And looking back now at knowing what I was, it was someone grooming me.
Yeah.
Because that person, I gave my email to them, and we were talking over email, and then that's how this whole entire door to pornography was opened. They said, "No, you don't know what that is? Like, that's completely sick," and like kind of shaming me of like, you should know what that is by this age, and being like, look this up and look this up. And I remember that they wanted to meet me at some point, and this is why I really believe it was someone grooming me.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't, because I was like, oh my God, to get to Canada, But I think I just eventually lost interest in talking to her and stuff like that. But that opened the door for it. And it's like when you're 13 and you're seeing these things, it's like that's just hijacking your brain.
Yeah.
And it's a real problem for a lot of men, especially in today's day and age where it's so accessible, it's so easy. I mean, it really should just be completely illegal for children to get their hands on it just because it's so damaging. But it's like, I was 13 years old, and it's like, I'm not gonna tell my parents, like, this is bad, it's like, so you just hide it, and you're weighted down by that guilt and that shame. And it's taken a long time for me to break free of that that shame aspect, even though I've been a Christian all my life. It's taken a long. I don't think it's probably been this last like 2 years of where that shame aspect, where I feel like I am comfortable talking about it, being like, I did that, and this is part of my past, but it's like it's wiped clean. It's like I did it, but I didn't. It's not on my record anymore. And I think that takes a lot of the shame away from it. Of just knowing that when Christ was on that cross, those sins that I committed, he took. I don't need to be ashamed anymore. And I can talk about it, and I can, maybe in talking about it, hopefully there's some young 13-year-old boy that hears this and is like, oh, someone sent me something. And I would tell that kid, I'd say, go and tell your parents, and talk to them, find a trusted adult and talk to them about it, because the earlier on that you get it, the easier it is to quit.